Volcanologists climb into the inferno on two of the planet's most active volcanoes.
This is actually a bit worrying. This is an impact from an explosion to some extent.
Where nature's raw power lay at every turn.
It was so fast I couldn't even get scared.
And see firsthand the elements that are shaping this Earth.
This volcano is capable of producing very powerful explosions. It's never a safe place to be on the rim of an active crater.
This is the realm of nature's greatest spectacle. Indonesia is called the Land of Fire, and for good reason. It has 147 active volcanoes. Two of them, Dukono and Ibu, are considered to be among the most active volcanoes on the planet. In spite of the intense level of activity, they're rarely visited or photographed. That's because of their location in a remote part of a country that is made up of more than 17,000 islands. Volcanologist and photographer Tom Pfeiffer runs a tour company and a news website, Volcano Discovery. The website is an important resource on volcanic activity used by scientists all over the world. Dukono and Ibu feature frequently in his reports, but recently he's noticed a steady upturn in their behavior. Every volcano has a cycle. There are times when its activity is increasing, and it's still possible to get close enough to see the eruptions. If Tom is ever going to see these two volcanoes, the time is now. The remote location makes getting there difficult. Tom has a small group of fellow photographers who have signed on for the trip. The furthest they can fly is to the island of Ternate. It takes 3 flights and several days. From there, Tom charters a boat to get them to the island of Halmahera, where both volcanoes are located. They are met by Andy Susanto. He's Tom's operations manager in Indonesia and an expert when it comes to Indonesian volcanoes. It's arguable that Andy has spent more time on active volcanoes than anyone else in the world. Andy is one of the few people who has climbed Dukono and Ibu. The boat trip from Ternate to Halmahera takes 1 hour. The hope is they'll be able to climb both volcanoes as they are erupting, but there are no certainties. Every step of the way will be carefully evaluated for risk. Tom and Andy's first step will be to check in with local authorities to obtain the proper permissions to climb.
We are here at the Volcano Observatory for Mount Dukono. Each active volcano in Indonesia has at least one local observatory. We hope we can talk to the volcanologists to find out what the activity has been, what to expect, also to let them know that we are climbing.
There is 3 staff who work for the observatory post. In every observatory post, they have to report every evening and every in the mornings to report about the seismic, about the activity to the central of the office of the Volcanological Survey of Indonesia.
The volcano is monitored by a series of seismometers. These machines up on the volcano record every minute earthquake that indicates magma moving through the system or each explosion. Scientists can tell a lot from these seismic signals. Here, the near-continuous pattern indicates the constant venting of ash.
This is like this is V.
Looking at the readouts, Tom and Andy can see that Dukono is now more active than in the preceding weeks.
This is from 7 November, it's yesterday. That was really active with the ash bloom and then ash eruption from the Dukono from the main vents. 2 days ago, this is also the same. This is 6. So almost every day with ash explosions, with ash eruptions.
Even though it is more active, the current phase is more predictable and less dangerous. That's good news. They get their permission to climb. First up, they hit a local market to buy everything they will need for the trip. At the foot of Dukono is the small village of Tobelo. About 15,000 people live and work here and keep a watchful eye on the activity.
She said 2 years ago when Dukono was really active, she could hear about, about the rumbling and then ash also here, and then ready to evacuate at the time. So actually people here, the local people also afraid about Dukono.
Tom finds a stall selling rocks and minerals.
A nicely cut piece of black volcanic rock. I would guess it's a volcanic rock. It's dense, glassy. It's almost like obsidian, but it's probably something else.
For locals, trading in rocks and semi-precious stones is a great way for people to earn money. In a country prone to earthquakes and eruptions, geology is taught in depth in the local schools. The subject covers rocks and minerals as well as the volcanoes around them. As the start of the hike is a ways out, Andy has arranged for transportation through a local coconut plantation.
I think the biggest danger right now will be hit by a branch or something. I've had similar situations sometimes. You look at something else and you don't see a branch coming. Boom.
You'd think with an active volcano, people would completely vacate the area. But Dukono has been active since 1933 and posed little threat to the villages. People have grown used to living in the shadow of this volcano. Here, the coconut plantation is still in operation. However, the roads that extend into the danger zone are not used and have currently fallen into disrepair during the rainy seasons. It makes getting to the volcano's upper slopes challenging. The vehicle will need a good run at the difficult sections. So, to shed weight, the group walks ahead. They are still a ways out. If the vehicle has to turn back, it will mean that the moderate hike ahead will turn into a hard, full day's journey, something they won't be able to make before nightfall.
The truck's made it. So time to continue. Glad it hadn't rained.
Because you didn't bring a chicken.
I think when you have a lot of rain, you can't pass here.
All along the way, they encounter new obstacles. The drivers don't give up. they've reached the furthest point the cars can go.
We've made it, or the cars made it. Now, the last kilometers is on foot. According to Andy, it's about 2 to 3 hours, easy to moderate.
So now we are in the altitude 350 meters above sea level. And we have to get back all the things, logistic, and then we proceed to climb.
They may be climbing an active volcano, but at this point, it's pretty much like any other ascent. They plan to stay 2 days, so a team of porters brings all the equipment and tents needed. Partway up, they run into a surprise. A university group and their teacher are also heading up to see the active crater. These students will be the next generation of geologists in Indonesia. Some will go to work on volcanoes around the country. Here, they get first real-world knowledge of an active volcano. As they get closer to the active crater, everything around them is covered in a layer of ash. And finally, their first reward, a close-up view of Dukono. They establish a camp at the boundary of the danger zone. Beyond it, the risk of being hit by falling rocks during a moderate eruption increases. Hundreds of trips to volcanoes has led Tom to believe that if you respect the danger and pay heed to the warning signs, other elements of the trip will actually pose a bigger danger than the explosions. A lightning strike from a simple rainstorm nearly hits the camp just as the students arrive.
We just had a lightning strike out of the blue. It was so fast I couldn't even get scared. And it was a big bang right at the right second. It must have been less than 100 meters.
After the rain breaks and the camp is set, Tom has a look at the volcano he has only read about. It's a beautiful ash cone, and as the seismographs predicted, it's constantly emitting ash.
Right now, there is ash fall in the downwind area of the plume. Sometimes you can see vertical lines under the ash. It is a result of light and shadow, but it's curtains of fine sandy material that is falling out of the plume.
The ash here is washed downstream, where it builds the lower slopes of the volcano and provides the nutrient-rich soils of the village farmland.
If you go from the top to the bottom, you go back in history, and you can have an idea of what the volcano has been doing in the past. So the top black layer, we've had a phase of mildly explosive activity, a bit like what we're seeing now.
If you go from the top layer to the bottom, you can have an idea of what a volcano has been doing in the past.
Here's also a little pumice layer. During this activity, there must have been very powerful explosions, where fresh magma rich in gases came out to erupt and become pumice, especially here. And I don't know how deep this goes, but typically you find this pumice as an oval-shaped deposit in the same direction as the wind at the time.
When they're putting together the history of a volcano, volcanologists will sample several locations around it. By determining the ash and pumice thickness, they can plot the total area affected and calculate the volume of the material deposited. From this, they are able to recreate the volcano's eruptive history, dating back thousands of years. Information like this can help determine the danger and understand the far-reaching effects of each volcano. They can also look for evidence of cataclysmic eruptions and the phases that preceded them.
It is important to know what the volcano has been doing in the past to have an idea of what it might be doing in the future. It might be doing something like this for centuries, but doesn't mean that it's always like this.
The group will stay in camp tonight, for safety's sake. Before they can do any climbing, they will take time to watch Tukono and make sure that its behavior is consistent with the seismic data. It's absolutely necessary to know what the recent seismic patterns are, but that's not a safety guarantee. It is possible that the volcano's activity will ramp up and become dangerous with no warning. For the porters, it is just another day.
If you choose to go up, it should be based on a risk-benefit analysis. Tukono can certainly produce very strong and powerful explosions that eject bombs and rocks to the crater rim and beyond. In which case, if you're there, you're at risk to be hit and lose your life. It is not a completely safe thing to do, but on the other hand, I believe that the risk, if you stay there a couple of hours, is lower than the risk of a car accident, especially after experiencing how people drive here.
The group will make their climb to the crater in the early hours of the morning. In the meantime, they break for dinner. And their guide, Andy, gets to show off some of his other skills.
Now I'm cooking, which is called in Indonesia, this is cha kangkung. Kangkung means water spinach. Yeah? So the way is easy, but this is quite, very good flavored and then delicious. Iya, ayamnya udah masak itu. Tinggal dibakar dikit aja, dikasih tadi bumbu itu. Satu lagi di tengah.
After dinner, the group takes time to relax before their climb. It will take less than an hour. The climb begins at the crack of dawn, and members of Tom's group make it to the rim before sunrise. They're standing above the active crater as it continues to erupt ash in a constant plume. The volcano continues to erupt ash, as it's been doing for weeks. Inside, you can hear the sounds of the elemental processes of our Earth at work.
Now the ash plume looks more active and intense. The rumbling actually, come from ash ventings occurring, and then also with the rock falls down there.
You can see it's a very active volcano. It has been in continuous eruptions for decades now. It almost sounds like hail, sometimes heavy hail during a thunderstorm. I imagine there's a jet coming out of gas, ash, and small rocks. We don't see them, but we clearly hear these little rocks falling back. And those sounds, these are lightning, not explosions.
Scientists don't fully understand why there's lightning in volcanoes. It's believed to be caused by ash particles that move against each other, causing a static buildup. As the plume rises, the convection within pulls apart the two masses with opposite charges. If the charge is strong enough, it can create a path of ionized air that conducts electricity that forms a lightning bolt. Large ash plumes can generate long bolts of lightning. Here, it happens on a smaller scale within the denser part of the plume. Volcanic lightning can be dangerous. During an eruption of Paracutin volcano in Mexico, 3 people were killed by lightning that originated from the ash cloud. The geology students arrive at the rim to conduct their classes on active volcanoes. Here, they get a first-hand look at the forces that are shaping their country.
I think we are safe-ish here. It's not, of course, it's never a safe place to be on the rim of an active crater, but I haven't seen any fresh impacts. In fact, I haven't seen any impacts here in this part. So likelihood is very, very little that that something is being ejected here while we're here. However, this volcano is capable of producing very powerful explosions, so-called Vulcanian explosions. Throughout the past years, every now and then you get reports of very tall ash plumes rising several kilometers. That means you have an explosive activity 10 times more powerful than this, and probably more as an isolated explosion. When a plug forms at the vent, which now seems to be more or less open, but when there is a plug that forms, it blocks it, and pressure can build up and then release it in a sudden, powerful, so-called Vulcanian type explosion, then you'd be in trouble here.
Standing on the rim, the view of Dukono is spectacular, but looking downhill from the crater is also an impressive sight. This cone is mostly built from loose ash deposits. When it rains, this material is eroded, creating an otherworldly landscape. This mountain building process is testament to Dukono's high activity.
I would count Dukono as one of the 4 or 5 most active volcanoes in Indonesia. And Indonesia is a heavyweight when it comes to volcanoes. It's number 1 when it comes to the number of active volcanoes. And this is one out of the top 4 or 5 of Indonesia. And on a global scale, it's one out of the top 20, I'd say.
There are many factors that determine how a volcano erupts. 3 of those are the amount of magma in its reserves below the volcano, the amount of volatile gases contained in the magma, and the type of magma. Some types of magma flow out in gently glowing rivers that cover the land, while others explode suddenly with force, throwing ash and lava blocks into the air. For the past 80 or more years, Dukono has produced mostly consistent ash eruptions mixed with the occasional lava flow. So while it is one of the most active volcanoes on the planet, its activity has had little impact on the people living around it, and for the time being is not threatening. Dukono's neighbor, Mount Ibu, an hour's drive to the west, is a different story. It is a small volcano with an explosive personality. It erupts magma known as andesite, which is very sticky and collects at the summit in what's called a lava dome. Lava domes can build up to the point where they collapse, causing a burning hot avalanche called a pyroclastic flow. Here, the volcano sits above the small town of Tallinn.
The first thing we'll do now is to visit a local observatory to get informed about the activity, also to tell them that we have an intention to climb. They expect everybody to register so they know, and they hopefully give us sort of a permit. The observatories are usually at the same time equipped with kitchen, bedrooms, because they're manned 24 hours. There's Ibu. Up there at the crater, you have inside a lava dome which has been growing over the past years. It could easily generate pyroclastic flows that would come down here and threaten this village.
Tom and Andy want to look at the seismic charts to see Ibu's most recent eruptive behavior.
So he said, since 2012 that actually Ibu volcano has been erupting and being active, and also the status now is still in level 2.
Level 2 means activity is present but continuing at a constant level. If a volcano shows signs of increased activity that may lead to a larger eruption, It will be categorized as level 3 and evacuations will begin. Each mark on the seismograph represents an eruption. What they can tell from these charts is this is a very active volcano. Today alone, there have been more than 50 eruptions.
There is explosions, and then that sometimes the bombs, ejected until 900 meters.
Where they plan to go will put them right inside the active crater.
Yeah, we still climb, but let's see if there is too dangerous, and then so let's see that. So,
as they're standing, the seismograph registers an eruption.
See an explosion that occurred right now. See the ash plume? Yeah, that's quite an explosion. If you're close, this would be quite something. That's why the guys are here to observe it, and if the situation changes at some point, maybe in the future, the government will have to take measures, I guess. But it's not, it could be in 100 years, it could be next year, it could be in 1,000 years. But as it is now, life goes on.
Duono village is a 30-minute drive from the observatory. It is the gateway to Ibu. It is also the place most in danger if there is a major eruption. The town sits at the opening of a giant breach in Ibu's cone. Any eruptive flow from the volcano would come straight down to the village. About 2 years ago, when Ibu woke up after a short slumber, the village was evacuated. But as the volcano's activity stabilized, people have moved back. But still, outsiders rarely come here. Duono doesn't even have a hotel.
I think they haven't seen many visitors here. It's so remote, hardly anybody comes here. Maybe a few Westerners per year, and that would be a lot, I guess.
Without any tourism in the area, Andy is forced to improvise for accommodations.
it's actually the house of the Kades. Kades means the chief of the village. So that's very important to us. We're gonna stay here for camp tonight, yeah. So we just sleep like in the floor, and then we're gonna start climbing Ibu tomorrow morning. Then from here.
With rain continuing into the night, the group won't be able to see any eruptions. Tom had hoped to see if the eruptions were ejecting lava rocks called bombs, as far as the crater rim. At night, these bombs are visible. The following morning, it is still raining, and the forecast says rain will continue most of the day.
We are actually not 100% sure if we can go all the way to the rim. It will depend on the activity. The lava dome has been producing frequent explosions, so we'll have to see if and how fresh any impacts are in the upper area. So if we find too many fresh bomb impacts, obviously it wouldn't be a good idea to go.
Tom's also worried about the cloud cover.
Well, if there's no visibility, there's no real point in staying at the crater rim. It increases also the hazard, the risk of being caught in an explosion because you can't see anything, and also then there's no value of being there. So we should only go to the rim if there's also good visibility.
In spite of the weather, Tom and Andy decide to go ahead with the climb, in the hope that the weather breaks by the time they reach the crater rim. Although the group managed to get the necessary permission, officials were hesitant to let Andy's group climb because of Ibu's increase in eruptive activity. They agreed because of Tom's status and experience. But the officials require that the group be accompanied by Arnold, who is the spiritual guardian of the volcano. This is considered a high honor. One thing Tom's experience has taught him on volcanoes all over the world is the importance of having a local guide.
He's the chief of the volcano, the most experienced man around who knows Mount Ibu volcano. He just got the idea to have
a stick would be handy, and I asked him. I think this makes school. Everybody now will want one. It seems this trail hasn't been walked recently, so Arnold, our head guide, has to use his machete a lot to clear the path.
It's likely Andy was the last person to climb the volcano 6 months ago. He came to check out its potential for guiding. Tom will rely heavily on his experience and Arnold's too.
Challenging.
Yeah, that's volcanic ash. So occasionally when the wind is going this way and there is an explosion, so you will have ash fall in this part. And then in the dry season, this ash will cover the leaves. And with the first rain, the forest washes itself. That happened tonight, but you see remnants. So I suppose the closer we get to the rim, the more of this we will see.
They also have come upon the seismograph station that relays earthquake info back to the volcanic observatory.
So probably right now they'll have some noise as we're walking by. Our steps will be recorded by the instrument.
Now they're entering the high danger zone. Fragments of rocks thrown from the crater during large explosions are visible.
This is actually a bit worrying. This is an impact from an explosion at the summit. This is one of the larger fragments, but they're all around, I guess. You know, when they fall at great speed, 100 meters a second, and there's so much energy. When they fall, the soil is soft, so it makes this sort of craters. This one is slicey, man. We are 1 kilometer horizontal distance from the crater. So this is entirely within the range of moderately sized explosions. Nothing unusual. So one shouldn't be deceived by the large vegetation. We are in a more high-risk zone of an active volcano.
Arnold, their guide, tells Tom that impact was from 2 years ago. If it were more recent, fresh fragments would be found on top of the vegetation. They're 30 minutes from the crater rim and should begin to see a lot more of this.
Here's another bomb, right on the trail. Obviously, the higher we come, the closer we get to the dome, the more of these guys we can expect. Just hope they're not very recent, Haifa. It didn't impact right here. Maybe somewhere, but it's difficult. It could be the same one or it's another one. It could be, it's likely it's the same. Maybe it impacted here. This one sits in the soil. Yeah. We're definitely getting closer to the crater.
According to my experience, my opinions, even now if we continue to drill this, still safe. For when I see, what I saw it from the seismograph. So
well, I have never been on this volcano, but as a general rule, you should approach it slowly. We've been climbing fast, and to me it looks the rim is in mist at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have no added value to be at the rim, but we increase our risk. I'm sorry to talk about risk and these things, but from here we have much more safety margin. If we stay here half an hour, relax, and maybe listen. Down there I could hear the weak sound of an explosion. If we stay here for half an hour and maybe hear another explosion and get a better feeling for the mountain, that it's not maybe not too active. So one thing I would hate is we arrive at the rim and we just hear a very loud explosion. We don't know what's happening.
Both the volcano chief and Andy disagree with Tom, but he overrules them. The crater rim sits just over a football field away from the active crater. There is no room for error on this volcano. After 30 minutes and no eruption, they decide to continue on.
There was an explosion. Sound of. No bombs. That's a good sign. But we are getting close. I think we are 100, maybe 150 meters below the crater rim. So, yeah, this will be interesting.
Tom makes it to the volcano rim. The cloud cover is so thick that they can't see how far they are from the active vents. They'll wait for the next eruption and listen to hear where the bombs are falling.
This must be the active flow. It goes down this way. I try to go a little bit further there to see. We can see how far it goes.
The porters begin to set up camp as the rest of Tom's group makes it onto the rim. In the mist, they hear the sounds of the volcano violently degassing, followed by an eruption. From the sounds, they can tell that the bombs are not flying towards their camp. That means they're in a good location. The porters get back to building a shelter in case the rain starts again. Tom retrieves a couple of dead trees to use as poles for a makeshift shelter. After a while, the clouds begin to break. They get their first look at the active vents within the crater. It's unnervingly close. This volcano is not for the faint of heart.
This is Ibo volcano's crater and the recent lava dome. This black grayish mass of lava that occupies most of the crater. And its center, a small cinder cone, which is currently active.
It's a small eruption from the furthest crater. This eruption only produces ash mixed with steam. It's not from the vent that ejected bombs. Each vent will erupt differently, so they will have to see an eruption from the other two to know if it's safe.
Right now, it seems it is, however, in a phase of more frequent but smaller eruptions. So that's why I think we are reasonably safe here for a limited time, of course. But you can see all the trees have been stripped off their smaller branches. Trees, they all died as a result of frequent impacts, leaving just the trunks and the major branches intact. These volcanoes in subduction zones typically produce a kind of lava that is relatively rich in silica. So it is rather viscous, stiff, it doesn't flow, it doesn't behave like the lava on volcanoes like Hawaii, which is fluid and can form channels and can actually behave visually like a liquid. No, the lava that the volcano has been erupting over the past years accumulates above the vent to form a broad cake-like structure called the lava dome. It is too stiff to actually flow. So it rather accumulates as a huge pile of blocky mass. This type of
Eruptions are potentially very, very dangerous because the high viscosity of the lava also traps gases inside, which can lead to sometimes big explosions.
This is footage Andy shot on Semeru volcano on the island of Java. It shows an active lava dome in action. As the pressure builds up inside, the entire structure lifts and the dome inflates. If too much pressure builds up, the dome can suddenly explode. Back on Ibu, suddenly the left vent begins to vigorously degas. The sound is similar to what the group heard when they first arrived on the crater rim, just before the first explosion. The gas indicates that this is a small lava dome. As on Semeru, the gas is trapped under the crusted-over magma. When the pressure builds up and the vent explodes, it will likely throw bombs into the air. This shoots jets of ash.
So I think the vent on the right, on our right side, is having so-called phreatomagmatic activity, where groundwater interacts with the magma and produces explosion.
As it flashes to steam, the instantaneous expansion of the gas is enough to blast through the rock, fragmenting it into small pieces. The pieces fall around the crater, building up its small cone. Now they wait for the third crater to erupt. We get to see the eruption in detail. The explosion shatters the dome, sending chunks of lava away at supersonic speeds, thankfully in a direction away from the group. The inner crater is bombarded with rock fragments. It was these types of explosions, yet on a much larger scale, that produced the impact site that Tom found on the way up.
Volcanoes are always good for surprises. I didn't expect at all this type of strombolian activity and the classical beautiful explosions where lots of incandescent bombs thrown up to maybe 100, 200 meters, accompanied by loud bangs that resound at the crater walls. You have wonderful echoes. It's an absolutely eerie atmosphere. So you see the bluish gas indication of fresh magma underneath. The same vent is probably still feeding a little bit this lava flow, which has a slightly brownish color.
As the sun dips behind the horizon, the faint glow of lava can start to be seen. At night, the eruptions look completely different. Glowing incandescent lava blocks are thrown from the craters.
So I think we've had a great experience, and we saw another one of the top 5 most active volcanoes in the whole of Indonesia. Each volcano has its own personality. It's completely different from what we saw at Dukono, but it's great as well. For me, this ranks so far number 1 in terms of scenery, experience. Also the climb here is relatively long, strenuous climb, but you are rewarded with a magnificent view.
It's been another great adventure for Tom. But getting this close to Ibu's crater is something very few people will experience. Its remote location makes it tough to get to, and the chance that the volcano could suddenly generate a large eruption keeps people away. But for Tom, getting to experience both Ibu and Dukono and read the geological records they've left is an important part of his work as a volcanologist. Both Ibu and Dukono are in the elite, the top 20 of the most active volcanoes on Earth. They are the surface layer of the elemental forces that continue to shape and reshape Indonesia's volcanic islands.